Okay. Hello. I think we're live now. We
Woo!
are.
We're alive!
So hello everyone. And hello Erin and Sarah. Welcome to our very first Facebook Live little chat here this evening. We're going to be talking about artist statements and we're going to give it a go here. My name is Matt Thomas. I'm an artist, I'm an architect, a curator, and I'm the executive. So welcome everyone. The Paseo is a nonprofit here in Taos, New Mexico, and we host the annual Paseo Festival in September. But we work year-round with projects and collaborations, transforming community with art and art with community. And today we're here to chat about the much dreaded writing your artist statement. I think for me, living in a year now within this pandemic, I miss those spontaneous conversations and the discussions that we would have. Especially here in Taos where we might run into other artists and friends. And when you meet and you get to talk about things and you talk about what you're working on and you get to hear from each other and get that support and things you're working on. And I think now more than ever, we need to continue that. And so we started this monthly column in the Taos News called Out of the Studio, and we set out to really keep that conversation going and talking about key issues impacting artists. And so with this series, we're doing tips and advice and words of wisdom from our community and helping to support our community through those experiences, our fears, our successes, just uplifting all of our voices. So first up is writing about artist statements. If you've read it, take a look. It's in this week's paper or it's online. And Rita is there in the chat. She will put a post to our article there if you want to read it. And I want to thank really quick Lynn Robinson of the Taos News, Rita O'Connell, who is there supporting us from Paseo, and all the contributors to this month's article, Larry Bell, Ann Landy, Nicole Dalkay, Kathleen Brennan, Meredith Garcia, Sarah Hart, and of course, Johanna Diabazi for her beautiful illustrations that will accompany these articles. Please follow her at Paper Prankster on Instagram. And now for my guests. So I'm really excited to have you both. I'm really honored to have you both. I feel like I'm going to learn a lot right now. So Sarah Stolar, Erin Elder, welcome, and thanks for jumping in on this live chat with us. I'll just do some quick intros. So Sarah has been an educator for 15 years and is currently the chair of the Department of Fine Arts and Digital Media at the University of New Mexico here in Taos. She has seen her fair share of artist statements and has written a few herself. Sarah is an interdisciplinary artist working with a vast technical perspective. The breadth of her work includes painting, drawing, multimedia installation, film, video, and performance art. And check her out at sarahstolar.com. And Erin Elder is an artist as well and an independent curator and consultant with more than 20 years of experience supporting artists. Erin launched Gibbous in 2015 to support committed artists. Gibbous offers professional services for artists through customized support, helping artists to meet their potential with authenticity and professionalism. With Gibbous, she has helped win support for artists ranging from fellowships and national art prizes to funding for projects, research, and travel. And of course, her link is gibbouscreative.net, and we'll put those in the chat also for people. So welcome, artist statements, scary, unknown world. You know, one of my favorite quotes that I received in doing this, and then I'm going to shut up for a while, is from Sarah Hart, who's a local artist here in Taos. And she just cracked me up. She said, "We don't ask writers to draw us a picture of what they do, yet we ask visual artists to write about what they do." And I just love that. So why is it so important that we need to as visual artists, we need to learn how to write about our work?
Good question. Erin, you want to take it away? Well, I love communication. I mean, I think art is always trying to express and communicate something about the world that we live in, about the feelings that we have. And so visual or performative or, whatever our artwork is, I think is one way of expressing. And words and text are just another way to kind of unlock the meaning. And so I really encourage artists to not be afraid, because I think writing an artist statement can be a great creative act. It can be an act of self-awareness and mindfulness, and it can really kind of bring you closer to your work and hopefully be better understood as a result.
Yeah, and thanks for giving me something to jump off of, because that, I think one of the most important points that you just made for me in writing an artist statement is that it gives me clarity on my own work. So it can be really daunting when we think about writing it for somebody else. And so when we think about writing it for ourselves, it can help us understand how we and why we make work, because as visual artists, I love the metaphor, by the way, the comparison, I mean, the writer and the artist is so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, you know, sometimes we don't know why we're making something. We just kind of follow the path. And sometimes we think that we're making something based on some immediate experience or something that's happening right now. But when we write the artist statement, we might realize that there are bigger, greater themes that are covered in the work. And then to kind of directly answer your question, I tell my students all the time, at some point you're going to have to talk about your work. And so as much as we all hate it, and I don't think I know any artist who loves writing an artist statement, it's a necessity. We can't hide behind, well, if I wanted to be a writer, I would be a writer. That doesn't really fly.
But I think you want to have a good artist statement, because I think we all want to be understood, and we all want people to feel like they know who we are, what we're doing. And so, you know, it's worth taking the time to do something right and to feel hopefully that ring of authenticity when you're like, yes, this expresses what I'm trying to do here. This feels right, because you don't want to put an artist statement out there that doesn't feel good, or that's just a bunch of gobbledygook, because I think you miss that opportunity of really connecting with people, which is what a statement has the opportunity to do.
Let's talk about ways in which to actually get those words out, because I think I've heard a lot of different techniques, and I think all of us as visual artists can have total writer's block in terms of even staring at the screen. In the article, I mentioned techniques of like recording, just talking, go for a walk and just start talking into your phone. Have your friends record you, have your friends interview you, talk, just those, or have your friends tell you what they think about your work. Any other thoughts that you all have experienced or know of a good way for us to pour out our brain, at least as a good start, to say, what is my work? You know, what is my work about?
Well, you know, the artist statement, if we really kind of break it down into baby steps, that can be a little easier, especially if we haven't written one before, or we feel like it needs a complete revision. And I see it as kind of, and I don't think I'm alone in this, as 3 distinct sections. There's your subject matter and your concepts, which are kind of different, right? The subject matter is what you make, and your concepts are why you make it. What materials do you use? And I feel like this gets left out of a lot of artist statements. It's really, really important. And what are the processes and techniques? And if we start kind of not in paragraph form, and we just start with lists, you know, like, okay, what do I make? Why do I make it? What motivates me? What do I work with? What are the processes and techniques that I use? Once we get those kind of 3 categories down, I think we can start to make some conceptual connections back from materials and processes and circling back to concepts and subject matter. And we can start to connect the 2. You know, I work in 60mm film because of the nostalgia, et cetera, and we can kind of circle back. And that's just an example. That's not my statement. But yeah, so I think it's a great challenge.
I love that. I love that.
I just want to add too that I think, you know, the desire to say something really impactful and powerful and what it's about often blinds us from really using descriptive language. And I think that's where what you're getting at with bringing out the medium and the process. It's like, what does it look like? How is it made? You know, is it colorful? Is it textured? Is it large? Is it small? You know, does it vary in scale? Like, I think some of those things we take for granted because we know our work so well, but like really just starting with really just starting with the nitty gritty can be the best way to then, I think, build up to those bigger ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's also kind of a misconception because times are changing, and we have this old way, or at least thankfully and hopefully it becomes the older way of talking about art, which is kind of elitist and separating, you know, distancing from the viewer. Art speak, quote unquote, is important. We have to use the language that we need to use to talk about the work in a professional way. But it can get a little jargony sometimes, and I think that a good reminder is to just go back to your authentic voice. Your suggestion to use a thesaurus, I mean, I can't stress that enough. Descriptive words, maybe instead of describing your painting, think about 5 ways you would describe wine or chocolate or sand. Write those adjectives down. But I think that when one of the reasons it can feel overwhelming is because we have this massive umbrella of important art people who are reading the work. And so we feel like we have to sound like we really know what we're talking about. And I think it's best to just start with your authentic voice, make sure you hit those points, and then seek out a coach, a friend, an artist who has more experience than you, who can help you kind of swap out some of that language to elevate it a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's some desire too in like what you said about the important art people reading it. I feel like that adds so much pressure to this task, especially because, you know, we're submitting statements for, you know, grants and exhibitions and opportunities that we really care about. So we want to convince people. But I don't know that the artist statement is a place to convince anyone. I think it should be a really authentic, clear, descriptive piece of writing that talks about what you do. And, you know, so often I see people wanting to make big generalizations about how their art is, you know, saving the world or, you know, reflecting the human experience and, you know, these huge things. And it is actually the opposite of persuasive because it's too grand, it's too broad. And so I think it really is helpful to get specific about who your work is for and what it's trying to do and be accurate with that. The more you can say, my work speaks to a specific small thing, people are going to have the likelihood of understanding that better and caring about it more and believing you.
Right, and I think it's a statement too. Sorry, Matt. Do you want to ask the question?
No, go ahead.
Just tack on that. I think that the statement should also help give insight into the work. So if you see the work and you don't read the statement, you experience it in one way, and then you read the statement, and it gives you a little extra insight into the work. I think that that alternatively, one of the kind of points that's always stuck with me since college is that your artist statement should be able to describe your work to someone who has never seen your work before, and they should understand what you make. So a little of both.
Yeah. I want to keep on this idea of the jargon and the language, because I feel like even in my own experience, feeling this pressure of, and I love how you kind of said, just tell us what your work is about in sort of your own authentic voice. But don't you feel there's a certain place, or is this the place where you want to try to tie your work into a larger conversation or a discourse and sort of make it relevant for something that's happening now? Like, I feel like we all want to feel like we're participating in sort of what's happening now. Do you think this is the place for that? And should we be adding language that sort of connects our work to a larger conversation?
I think it is, but I think, again, it's really important to be specific, accurate, and careful. Like, you don't want to say, like, my work is like Basquiat's. I am, an abstract expressionist, even, is kind of a challenging thing to say. But to, talk about, like, my work relates to the natural world of the American Southwest or something, you know, to be much, or, you know, I'm embedded in a community and this work comes out of that specific engagement with people, you know, or my work in social justice has, you know, fueled this series about, you know, anti-racism or something. Like, I think that really being honest about how you're connected and where you're coming from can also be a view into your life and your community. And it doesn't need to be art historical, in other words. I don't think it needs to be like that big, if that makes sense. But what do you think, Sarah?
No, I absolutely agree. I actually wrote some don'ts down. Like, do not do this. And one of the things that I wrote down was don't directly quote or make references to other artists. Now, of course, there's always an exception to every rule, as we know, but this is really a place for you to talk about your work. In terms of tying it into the canon, that should happen kind of in a natural and authentic way based on the way that you work. For example, it makes sense for me to say that my paintings, that I'm interested in the history of traditional oil painting, right? That's a kind of a very simple, to the point, direct connection that ties to my work. I don't need to go off on a big tangent referencing artists. There's another time and place for that. One of the ways that I think that is a really great way to get some art vocabulary is to listen to podcasts. We know that we're kind of a carbon copy of the 5 to 7 closest people around us. We mimic their words, we mimic their mannerisms. And so if we just kind of flood our ears with people, art historians and artists talking about their work, then we will just absorb it. We'll kind of naturally start using that language. And so I think, you know, it's hard when you try with it actually has a name. It's International Art English. It is kind of this manifesto that was written by Alex Rule and David Levine. I wrote it down in case anyone's interested. And it basically talks about this overly jargony way of talking that is kind of a inside nod to the insiders that say, like, hey, I talk like this, so I'm one of you. But we know that art is changing. It's becoming more inclusive. It's expanding beyond the kind of traditional ways we know now. So with it should also come the expansion of language.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have a question. I'm wondering, you know, I think we all have seen artist statements that function as maybe more of an artwork in themselves. You know, maybe they're not so jargony, but they are truly expressive. Maybe they look more like a poem or a math equation, or, you know, we've seen some really weird ones and really creative ones. I wonder if you feel like that, like the artist statement is the place to really, like if that is a form that might be changing or can be, you know, addressed as a creative one.
Well, I'll answer with my teacher voice. Write the artist statement first, get a good strong handle on that, and then, you know, I actually wrote, don't include an abundance of poetics. Just get to the point, you know. First of all, people are busy. Second of all, we want to know about your work, right? And there's a time and a place and another time, I think, for that. I think that I've read some tremendous poetic artist statements. They're all from established artists. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've ever read any poetic artist statements from students that I felt like really communicated the importance of what they were trying to communicate, which is their concepts, subject matter, materials, and processes. So yeah, I'm all for it as long as we know what we're, you know, talking about.
What you're saying also brings to mind the notion of like a venue or a context for an artist statement. Like sometimes I think when you go to, especially maybe a group exhibition, you know, or you're participating in one and somebody says, you know, the curator asks all of the artists to present an artist statement and it's next to the work, you know, and I think that might be a situation where you could be more creative because, you know, it is an exhibition realm, it's, you know, creative, it's next to your work, you know, you have that kind of room to move maybe more than in a grant application or, you know, in some of these other situations where you're being judged on your words. I think knowing when to be more lyrical and when to be more descriptive, when to be more traditional and when to be more, you know, form breaking is an important thing to consider. Because artist statements show up everywhere.
A lot of what I heard too was keep it about 300 words. Would you agree to keep it within that amount?
I think that depends. You know, I have several artist statements. I have one that addresses everything that I do. There's kind of, you know, 200 to 300 words on each discipline that I work in. I then have specific artist statements that are kind of geared and directed towards a very specific body of work that's kind of separate and different. And then I have my elevator pitch artist statement that I kind of keep in my back pocket. And so I think that it's important that we all remember that there isn't just one artist statement. And this opens up, as what Erin is saying, room for more poetic things. That for yourself, you should have a really kind of firm handle on understanding of your work, however many words that takes. And then from there, you can copy, paste, revise, mix, match, and craft to fit each and every individual application or context.
I have a client who she really processes by writing. And so whenever she's making a new body of work, she'll write kind of this long essay, you know, and it's probably 5 or 6 pages long and she wants help refining it. And, you know, it's not really for anything other than her own articulation. And I really appreciate that. Not everybody has that in them or, you know, feels good doing that sort of thing. But for her, I think it's a really important way to find the words, to locate them, to, you know, hone in on them and say, yes, these words really describe what I'm doing here. And from that, she can kind of rework it. But I think I love what you're saying about having different statements for different bodies of work, for different occasions. You know, hopefully this is something that changes and grows as your work does. You know, I think the idea of the writing a statement that you've just like done it and then you never have to do it again, just copy and paste for everything thereafter, you're really selling yourself short on the idea of creative evolution.
And that's one of my favorite things I've learned from you, Erin, actually, and I've told that to you before is, you know, for me, when I went to write the statement, I was really intimidated about what I was saying right now. And you coached me into saying, Matt, your artist statement could be something totally different in 3 months. And that to me gave me that freedom to say, yeah, who am I at right now? And that doesn't limit who I am. And I think Sarah really expressed that too, saying, yeah, you could write 3 different statements approaching 3 different parts of your work or techniques or series. So to me, that's freedom. I think you mentioned that for others that might be frightening, yeah. But I don't want to be stuck with one statement for, you know, I want to keep that fluid.
Yeah. Well, I just want to jump in and say too, I think there's some room to be uncertain in your statement. You know, I think there's a space for vulnerability to say, I'm trying to understand this, or I'm perplexed, or I'm overwhelmed. You know, and I think also some of my favorite statements use questions instead of answers. You know, it's a very different thing to say, I'm trying to you know, I'm studying the spirit of the mountains. Like that's very different than saying, what is the spirit of the mountains? You know, and I think oftentimes a question can ignite the reader's imagination and bring them into that space of inquiry and curiosity that's probably driving your work. And so I really encourage people to be vulnerable, you know, like to not feel like you have it all figured out and you've said it and you've some sort of, ultimate thesis about the world, but you're kind of in the juicy figuring out part. Like, let that into the statement as well.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I just want to pick up on the vulnerable word, because this is something I really want to get in here. It comes up a lot in class and when I'm talking with students. A lot of people are making really personal work. They're getting really vulnerable in their work. And so we talk about how to talk about that. And one of the things that I encourage is that you approach your topics from a universal point of view. So instead of saying, this work is about my father's suicide, I could say, my work speaks to the nature of mental health in the United States in the 21st century. And what we've done there is we've now opened the door for personal experience with the viewer. A very personal statement, like what I said first, can be very alienating. It can, because it's like, what do you say now at that point after somebody says that, in their work? You're just like, wow. I do think there are times to get really, really vulnerable, but in your kind of artist statement that's going out for grants and shows and things like that, see if you can talk about those personal and vulnerable experiences in a universal way, so we can invite more people to connect with the work.
I love that. Especially, I see so many artists making work that was deeply tied to their identity. And I think especially young people now are really exploring that so much more than I was at their age. And that can be a real conundrum, like to try to, present yourself, explain yourself, but also, like you're saying, I think this is an opportunity to connect with people, to get past the feelings of alienation that might actually drive some of the work that people are producing.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. Keeping that in mind as we're even contextualizing. I think that goes back to what I was saying too about contextualizing. How do I add it? How does this add to a larger conversation? I think that really helps to back it up into a larger theme. I want to mention too, because I know for myself this has happened and I've seen other curators address this. Your artist statement is not your bio. These are two different things. Can we talk about that a bit?
Well, there's two different voices, right? I think that's part of it. The bio is like your narrative. It's your professional story. It's also not a list. That's maybe what you would call your CV or your resume. The bio is a narrative, and it's written in third person. So Erin Elder is a blah, blah, blah. Sarah Stolar is blah, blah, blah. Like, the artist statement is where you get to speak in I. That's where your heart comes in a little bit more. And so I think there's real potential for both to help you. They play off of each other. You can kind of talk yourself up and your achievements in the bio, the things you've done in your life, the stuff you're proud of, and then you can bring in more of your ideas and your heart and your work into the artist statement. So I love that they go together, and I love that you brought that up, because I think there are a lot of misunderstandings about which is which.
Absolutely. You can kind of, and on my bio, I have, it's funny because when you asked me to participate, I realized that, my artist statement is not, I mean, it's public, you could Google and find it, but it's not on my website. I have kind of a couple lines woven into my bio that kind of help to encapsulate the work. I think that's okay on the bio side. I don't think you can do that the other way around. In the artist statement, it's not the time to name drop. It's not the time to talk about your achievements. This is the time to show us that you care about your work, so that we care about your work. If you care about it and you speak about it authentically and you come, it's not trying to be something that it's not, it's clear, it feels true, then we will connect to it and believe it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I actually pulled up a sample of a really terrible sentence. Do you want me to read it?
Terrible sentence.
Okay. Because this is like what not to do. This is terrible. I feel like this is what everyone thinks they're supposed to do. It's just one sentence from a much longer, and it was hard to pick the worst sentence. So I'm going to pick the most succinct sentence. In giving careful attention to the mediating filters that propagate socially constructed irreverence, I aim to address the necessity of breaking down the symbolic paradigms of understanding to revisit the overlooked empathy for humanity and its greater accountability to each other. Word
Wow.
Wow.
Word vomit. I don't even know really what I just read. I mean, we could sit here and take an hour to like crack that down and try to figure out what the artist is really talking about. But wouldn't it be so much nicer and more connecting with your viewer to talk about humanity and humanity's accountability? Like I just said it in 3 words. I don't know why we need all of those words. And that's where I think why that 300 word thing kind of comes up a lot, because people who are professionals are kind of tired of reading stuff like that, I think, and we just want to know what you're making. And so I wrote down, like, can you say it in fewer words?
Mm-hmm.
So whatever you wrote first, that kind of let the word vomit come out, and then sit back. Or give something like that to someone who's not an artist and ask them if they understand what you're saying. Because if they don't, then you're kind of in trouble.
I think what you say too is, I'm thinking, fewer words, but also maybe more and shorter sentences. Like, this is not the place where you want people to be tripping up and like going back to reread. You want the reading experience to be very easy. You want the reader to just slide right through it and get it on the first run, so anything you can do to make it easy for the reader to read what you've written, like, and I think a lot of times that comes into just being succinct and brevity and saying less with more. That was a great example.
Well, even in all that, which is trying so hard to speak international art English, right? They made a massive error. I aim to address passive voice, right? We want to use an active voice. You're not aiming to do it, you're doing it. That's what you're doing. I love how Erin says, propose it with a philosophical question if you're still intending to, right? Be careful of that phrase. Be careful of referring to your own work as beautiful and using subjective language, because that's subjective.
Sorry, we have a couple great comments in the chat. I just, especially that wonderful statement that Sarah read, a lot of fun comments with that one. I love what Mandy Lee just said, Mandy Stapleford. She said, you would never say that sentence while you're standing in front of someone. So why not try to make it more like a conversation? And I think we've been saying that, using your authentic voice. And the other great comment came from Colette, and she says, this is where readers are important. And I want us to talk about that for a little bit, because I feel like the reason we're on Facebook Live right now, we're talking about this, is I feel like there's so much pressure that artists just have to know how to do everything. And to ask for help, or to feel like you don't know how to do something, and there's a lot of fear about putting it out there. So how important it is, to share your statement with someone else, to have someone else look at it, to hire an editor. I've done that so many times because I'm so insecure with my writing, and it's just the most freeing thing. And I know I'll just put a plug here for Erin and her work with Gibbous, is really there to support artists. So, and I know, Sarah, that's pretty much your job, is to support artists. But yeah, how important is it for us to just make sure someone else takes a look at that before we release it?
I just have to throw in a little plug for art coaches, because I have had 2 art coaches in my life, not including, my mother, and people who I've actually hired as art coaches. And the reward that came out of it was tremendous. I mean, completely just invaluable. So I really just have to say that if you have a trusted mentor or access to a coach, this is the time to use it, especially if you're working towards something really important.
It's something that doesn't get talked about enough in the art world. I think we imagine that artists are doing it all. We look at, people who are successful, and we're not like, gosh, they're so multi-talented, they do everything. And you know, behind the scenes, there's usually a few folks, whether you know it's somebody who's helping with a statement, or somebody who's helping, you know, with documentation. I just want to break down that idea that artists are alone, or that they should be alone, because I think success is a team thing for sure. And so getting used to sharing the work of your work with others is a great practice. Thanks for bringing that up, both of you. I think the idea of artists being alone with these challenges is really sad, and it's unnecessary. So yeah, reach out to people, and it can be a friend. You don't have to pay somebody necessarily. Like,
Right.
I love, you know, thinking that your mom has helped with your statements. I know my mom has helped with mine too. And I think reading aloud to yourself, sometimes you can be your own critic when you hear it in a different way. I think reading it to the mirror sometimes. I loved what you said earlier about recording yourself and maybe playing it back. Like something like that can jog that inner teammate that we have for ourselves also.
And it gets easier.
Yeah.
When I am making a new body of work and I have to write a statement about it, it feels impossible, because I don't have enough distance between me and the work to get that kind of retroactive analysis that happens where I can look back and try to figure out why I made this stuff. And sometimes I have to be forced into sitting down and trying to write something because of a time limit. But distance between you and the work can be really helpful. It gives you time to reflect. And then once you kind of practice the writing, it does, just like anything else, it gets easier. And I have written here, rewrite, revise, rewrite, revise, because it's going to grow. And that really applies to anything. Your website, your bio, that could change too. I mean, your life story won't change, but the way you word it, you're going to read more books, you're going to grow, you're going to get smarter, your vocabulary is going to change. You're going to want to go back and update it, just like you are constantly updating your work and your research and your practice. So the mentor, I can't, yes, because I'm a teacher, but if you have a mentor, listen to your mentor. Find a mentor you trust, and then listen to them, because they're there for your best interest to help you with what they're doing. And it's okay to go back and read other artist statements. You don't want to ever plagiarize or use kind of these phrases that kind of everybody uses a lot. They're kind of these buzz phrases. I'm examining a relationship between, right? Like every artist has that in their statement. Find new ways to say it. Start with lists.
I also think there's something to be said about creating an opportunity for yourself to write an artist statement. Like I love that people who, like the artist who I described earlier, who wants to write about her work in order to understand it. But I think a lot of us, we need an occasion to rise to. And so, I always think applying for things is one of the best professional practices that we can do, whether or not we get the residency or we get the grant or we, land the exhibition. It's really good just to feel yourself in the practice, in the flow, and to work at it, to find those words. Because I think I also hear both of you saying that there is some real satisfaction in kind of when you get there and you do it right. And so, most applications are going to ask you for some form of a statement or a project proposal. And so I'd say make a practice of doing that, make a practice of putting yourself out there, because when you have that thing that you're shooting for, something you're aspiring for, it's easier to do some of this administrative challenging stuff when there's a vision or an opportunity at the other end of it. So if you're just struggling to write an artist statement alone in your studio, maybe find something that you want to apply to that will force you to get all of your shit in order.
Yeah.
No, it's true. Nothing like a good deadline and like 1,000 characters that you have to fit within before you can push send. So let's do a couple little wrap up here. We're about 40 minutes in. I would love to see, can you like, is there, well, yeah, is there anything that you still want to say? And or you feel like is some of the most important things that artists should go into think about when they go into writing their artist statement? Like, would you have one tip or one piece of advice?
I'm going to circle back to what I said before, which is to use your voice, your authentic voice, right from the heart. Hit the things on the list, right? Subject matter, ideas, concepts, materials, processes, and techniques. Get those things in there. Use your voice, and if you believe it, then we'll believe it. So if you feel like you're just writing a bunch of bullshit, then we're gonna see through it. So just be authentic and talk about your work.
Yeah, I guess I'll riff on that a little bit and say, like, work at it, because when you do get there and you do feel that authentic, like, ring-a-ling ding ding, this is it, it's deeply satisfying. And I think we all deserve that. So, if it's hard, if it's challenging, if it takes you a while, if it takes you multiple attempts, if you have to hire somebody, like, hang in there, because it's really an important and valuable thing to do.
And that's also all normal, right? Oh my God, I sound so stupid. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm gonna burn my studio to the ground. Why am I doing this? That's all really normal. So if you're new at writing artist statements, just remember the first cake you baked, or the first dance class you took, or, the first time, I don't know, you did anything it's okay to be really bad at something in the beginning. That's why you have friends to help you and build your network.
Yeah. Well, thank you, both of you. I think this was really great. I'm definitely going to go back and write notes and re-listen to this, because I'm in the process of writing my own artist statements, and I could use all the support I could get. So I hope this is helpful to other people. We had some really nice comments in the chat. And let's keep the conversation going. I mean, we posted your websites for both of you. You two are excellent advice and have experience, and I know that in certain capacities you're available, and I invite everyone to continue to. I watch a lot of blogs, or newsletters, and try to read about art. I think that's really important to kind of keep my juices flowing. And so I want to thank you both for your time to be on here. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, and thank you, Matt, for all that you do to support artists and to sort of demystify art. I love what you're doing with the out of the studio stuff and conversations like this. I think it just helps us build community. So thank you.
Yes, and thank you so much. If anyone who's listening wants to read my artist statement, shoot me an email. I'm happy to send it over. It's not on my website. Why is it not on my website? Because it's scary.
That's hilarious.
30 years of doing this, and you're like, I don't know if it's good enough. But
totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
And so next month, we're going to be talking about artists and social media. So we're going to have a couple people. What's the best way to use social media? How are we using social media? What are the different ways to use social media? So check in back next month. So, okay, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.